is Sarah Elder and I'm going to be your teacher today. Today I will be teaching you how to properly use a semicolon, which are these little funky features right below. It's a colon, but instead of the dot below it, there's an apostrophe. So it's a dot and apostrophe. Now, first you're wondering, what is a semicolon? Well, here is a definition. A semicolon is a punctuation mark that is used to combine two closely related independent clauses. I'm sure you're wondering, what are independent clauses? Don't worry, here's some background knowledge for you to better understand this definition. Alrighty, so first of all, clauses are parts of sentences. And there are two types of clauses. There is an independent clause and a dependent clause. An independent clause, which you use semicolons for, this contains a subject, a verb, and a complete thought. So, to define subject, it's the topic of the sentence. Verb is an action. So, an example of independent clause would be, she fell. The subject would be she. The verb or the action would be fell. And it's a complete thought because it's a sentence all on its own. She fell. That is an example of an independent clause. Next, moving on to dependent clause. This is the part of the sentence that provides additional information, but cannot stand alone as a sentence. It's usually accompanied by words like while, that, unless. And it just adds extra information to your writing to make it more interesting and descriptive. An example of a dependent clause is, that made me cry. And that is describing a certain something. So, that made me cry. That is a dependent clause. It cannot stand on its own. But if you were to include an independent clause on that, then it can be a full sentence with it. So, she made me a cake. That made me cry. See how that is fully completed once you include an independent clause and a dependent clause? It makes a better rounded sentence. But the dependent clause cannot stand on its own. That made me cry is not a sentence. So it cannot be used in the semicolon format. So if you're still having trouble differentiating between these two types of clauses, you need to ask yourself, can this stand alone? Independent clauses, if the answer is yes to that question, it can stand alone, then it's an independent clause. If it doesn't stand alone, then it's a dependent clause. Another important word to know is conjunction. A conjunction is a word that connects word, phrases, clauses, or sentences. And it's an important fact to know because a semicolon does not have a conjunction at all. Never. If there's a conjunction in the sentence, there is no need for a semicolon. An example of a conjunction is and, yet, but. So, if you ever see these, you cannot use a semicolon. So, when can I use a semicolon? It's only when you're combining two independent clauses. And the independent clauses must have a subject, an action, and a complete thought all on their own. And there must be no conjunction. So, let's finally whip out those tools and start using semicolons in sentences. Here's an example. I have a basketball game tomorrow, semicolon, I'm playing point guard. See, both of these are independent clauses that have been joined together by a semicolon. We know they're independent clauses and not dependent clauses because they can stand on its own. I have a basketball game tomorrow, period. That could be a sentence all on its own. I'm playing point guard, period. That can also be a sentence on its own. So that's how you know they're independent clauses. Next, I love my parents. Semicolon, I assume they love me back. Notice how these all have the same kind of thought with them and are closely related together. Semicolons can be used too much on sentences that don't necessarily go together, and it can make it kind of confusing. A good universal rule is to think of how these are related together. And if you can easily make one sentence of how these sentences go together, then you got it. Then you can combine them with a semicolon, as long as they're independent clauses. So let's check this again. I love my parents, period. Could those be used as independent clauses? Could those stand on its own? Yes. I assume they love me back. That can also be a sentence all on its own that's an independent clause. Alrighty, one last time. I have debate tomorrow morning, semicolon, I can't stay out too late. See, once again, these are two independent clauses because these are both sentences all on its own. Alrighty, now, I'm sure you're wondering, why can't I just use a period? I mean, all these sentences I provided can be stopped by one period and it would be fine. It would be totally normal. However, semicolons do have a benefit to fill in periods. Sometimes if you use small, short sentences all together in one long essay, your essay can seem very choppy and informal. And that's not necessarily what we want in our writing. We want the audience to enjoy it. So adding a semicolon can add some variety. So instead of I eat, I sleep, I cry, we could maybe combine I eat and I sleep together with a semicolon, as these are both two independent clauses together and don't have a conjunction. And it could be I eat, semicolon, I sleep, period, I cry. And it makes it add more variety to your sentence, so it's not just a bunch of choppy sentences, and it doesn't make your reader seem very comfortable with the writing. Alrighty, here's a pop quiz. Alright, so is this semicolon being used properly? Although they tried, semicolon, they failed. I'm going to give you some thinking time. Alrighty, time is up. Let's give you the answer. Is this correct? No, it isn't correct. And that is because the first part of the sentence, although they tried, is not an independent clause. You cannot have this on its own. Although they tried, yes, it has a subject, yes, it has a verb, but it does not have a complete thought. Although they tried, what? You don't know what's going to happen next, and you don't know how the sentence is going to go. The although being in here makes this an incomplete thought, thus it's a dependent clause, because it cannot be a sentence all on its own. So if you want to combine although they tried, they failed, you will need a comma in between these clauses, because a comma combines a dependent and an independent clause. A semicolon can only bring together an independent and an independent clause altogether. Alrighty, and if you want some more practice, there's a link on here to a Kahoot if you want to do this at home, as well as doing the assignment as I have on my site below. And this is just a fun little activity if you want to get better on your semicolon usage. And it also throws in some extra information about commas and colons. Alrighty, now here's my works cited. You know how to properly use a semicolon now. Go out, do it, enjoy it. Thank you.